Throughout history, every major technological invention functions as an act of economic violence against whatever system preceded it. Before artificial refrigeration, the harvesting and shipping of natural ice was a highly profitable global trade. The refrigerated railcar wiped that entire physical industry off the map. The manual telephone switchboard supported a massive workforce of specialized operators. Automated dialing rendered their profession economically useless in a single generation. This creates a historical paradox. If you operate a billion-dollar monopoly with infinite capital and the smartest engineers on payroll, you should be able to identify a disruptive threat, purchase the patent, and control the outcome. The failure to do so rarely comes down to simple stupidity. It happens because of the Goliath trap. An incumbent monopoly relies on systems perfectly tuned to its current market, and that dominance creates a severe blind spot. When executives evaluate a disruptive technology, they apply their highly optimized financial models to it. Through that strict lens, the future almost always looks like an inefficient, highly risky, and terrible investment. In 1938, Chester Carlson invented electrophotography. He coated a metal plate in sulfur and used an electrostatic charge to trap an invisible image, rendering it visible with a dusting of dry powder. Conventional photography required bathing film in successive chemical liquids to develop an image. Carlson's dry process bypassed the toxic liquids entirely, offering instant copies on plain paper. Between 1939 and 1944, Carlson pitched his patent to more than 20 major corporations. General Electric passed. IBM passed. The men sitting in these boardrooms looked at the device and saw a solution to a problem their current customers did not have. They literally could not imagine a commercial market for office photocopiers. Carlson eventually partnered with a smaller enterprise that became Xerox. Decades later, realizing their categorical error, IBM attempted to enter the copier market and ended up paying Xerox a $25 million patent settlement. When corporate giants evaluate an invention based entirely on what their existing client base is asking for, they filter out the exact innovations that create entirely new markets. But what happens when a monopoly avoids that blind spot? What if their own research labs actually build the disruptive threat? Steve Sasson accomplished exactly that. Working in a Kodak laboratory in 1975, he engineered the first digital camera. Kodak management looked at the prototype and buried it. Their business model relied on the immense, recurring profit margins of physical film and chemical development. A camera that required no film was an internal hazard. General Electric made a similar calculation. Chemist H. Tracy Hall used a leaky 35-year-old press to create the first synthetic diamond, achieving in a laboratory what takes the Earth billions of years. GE had spent heavy capital on a massive Project Superpressure machine that had repeatedly failed. Embarrassed that Hall succeeded using cheap, modified scrap, they marginalized his individual role and rewarded him with a $25 savings bond. A corporation will actively quarantine its own scientific breakthroughs if those discoveries threaten to render their expensive infrastructure and primary cash cows economically useless. The ultimate expression of this failure belongs to AT&T. At the 1964 World's Fair, the largest corporation on Earth unveiled the picture phone, allowing visitors to see each other across the country in real time. Their forecasting was completely accurate. They correctly predicted that business travelers would pay for video meetings, and they spent heavily to own the network. Yet the product sat on the market and failed for 40 consecutive years. The problem was mathematics. An audio-voice signal is a trickle of information. A moving video image requires a fresh frame multiple times a second, demanding hundreds of times the bandwidth of a standard phone call. AT&T's physical empire was built exclusively for the trickle. Pushing a video flood through a standard copper pair degraded the signal instantly, making the service ruinously expensive to operate. A monopoly cannot force adoption through sheer capital. A technological breakthrough remains stranded until the surrounding infrastructure evolves to support it. But AT&T's stubborn refusal to abandon the picture phone forced their researchers to tackle the bandwidth problem directly. They helped pioneer video compression. Bell Labs engineers realized that a moving picture contains enormous repetition. Instead of transmitting the entire frame every fraction of a second, you could transmit only the differences, the parts that actually moved. The mathematics worked perfectly on paper, But executing that level of real-time compression required computing power that was astronomically expensive in the 1960s. The algorithms had to wait. It took decades for the cost of processing to collapse. When computation finally became cheap and abundant, a new global network built entirely for data emerged to carry the load. In their attempt to protect their own product, a legacy monopoly funded the precise mathematical formulas that would eventually arm their leanest competitors. In 2003, software companies like Skype utilized those matured compression algorithms to route high-quality voice and video data through the internet, charging the consumer absolutely nothing. The actual cost of a long-distance call immediately dropped to zero. For the telecom giants, the markup that had funded their global infrastructure evaporated in less than a decade. AT&T predicted the exact behavior of the modern consumer. They built the functional prototype 40 years before anyone else, and they still surrendered the market. Technology is entirely indifferent to the economic empires it displaces. Proving a concept is possible does not grant you ownership of its future. Often, the very infrastructure a monopoly builds to defend its dominance becomes the exact trap that ensures its obsolescence.